Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. We've been looking forward to it.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that very much, and a delight to join you. And good to see such a nice crowd out on a cold Washington Wednesday night. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I saw the caucus totals for Iowa caucuses on Monday night was down substantially, and you're going, it's 30 below, and everybody kind of thought the election was over anyway. So what do you really expect? And so it's down, but this is a nice group, and I really appreciate you guys coming out. And let me first start off by thanking you just for your heart. A number of you I know or have met and just talked to this evening. You've worked this space on religious freedom for a long period of time. And your heart is just can't stop working for this space because you know what's behind it. There's people that are suffering and that are being persecuted and harmed, and you can do something about it, and you're going to do it with every bit of breath that you have. And I want to honor you for doing this. I also know we had Facebook hosted a dinner that we were able to put together, and it was one of these really nice Washington type of lobbying events where it's a really nice dinner and there's wine served with it and it's a multi-course meal. And we had some of these religious freedom advocates there and we had a great response. You know, normally when you invite people to an event in Washington, D.C., you invite a bunch of people and you get a third of the people to respond and 10% of that to show up. It just dwindles. Everybody showed up. And I was thinking, wow, this is a great turnout. And then I thought, people in the religious freedom space are not used to being wined and dined. It just doesn't happen. There's no money in this space. There's nothing like that in this space. The reward is all in heaven on the other side. And so you end up eating cold chicken and slogging through cold nights and with a nice religious backdrop, that's what you get used to. But once in a while, when you get a nice meal out of it or a nice setting, you're going, okay, this is good here. But I want to honor your hearts because I can't thank you enough for them. And you know what I do, which is that there's just a lot of people that are suffering for their faith. They're being persecuted for their faith. They're getting it in any number of different ways. They're not walking away from it. They're standing and fighting. And if they'll stand and fight, I'll stand and fight. That's the least I can do. And that the tiny things that we can do seem pretty trite compared to the suffering that people go through. I remember I was in Taiwan. We did a religious freedom summit there a couple years ago. And the thought just hit me there that we're doing all of this because there are people in places all over the world in quiet corners, quietly praying to God, and God is hearing them. And his response is you. It's your hands, it's your feet, it's your voice, it's your heart. You're his response. And as such, that's a amazingly important thing that you're doing. Yeah, you're not getting any money for it. But God the Father is watching, and he's proud of you. And it's beautiful what you're doing. So keep it up. It's a beautiful thing we're doing. I was always, and have always been, ashamed is probably as good a word as I can use with the people that I've worked with that have been persecuted that I meet later. I'm shamed because the quality of their faith relative to mine. I look at it and I look at the suffering that they've gone through, and they're still standing or smiling, or they go right back into the place that they came from. Often, several times, I've tried to talk people out of going home saying, it's not a good idea. They still go. Some of them get locked up. Some of them die. And they still go. And that's what I mean, the quality of their faith versus mine. Maybe I should just say it stimulates mine rather than shames me. It stimulates it, but it's an incredible thing. I want to start off with a big statement and then try to back it up. This is the most important human rights movement on the planet right now. Of the broad spectrum of human rights issues, this is the most important human rights issue on the planet today. It is that because this is a cornerstone human right. You get this one sort of right, it opens up space for the other human rights to develop. You get this one sort of right, it opens up the space for human dignity to take root, and you to broaden your basis of discussion about, well, what all does it mean to be human and to have dignity? Well, number one, I get to pick what I do with my own soul. That's what it means. And no government or community should be able to tell me what to do with my own soul. This is the most precious thing that there is to me. It's the most central thing there is to being human. And as such, we're starting to now see, and you'll see at this summit, if some of you come to the International Religious Freedom Summit at the end of the month, now we're starting to be joined by some major human rights organizations. Freedom House is going to be there and sponsoring. National Endowment for Democracy is a part of it. And they haven't been in the past. They haven't been opposed to it. They just haven't been there. But now they're starting to see, if you can get this one right, there's a couple of things. Number one is you can tie into a global community of people of faith, because most people around the world operate by a faith. 80% of the world claims a faith of some type. Now, it may not be hugely operational in some of their lives. In some people, it is completely operational in their life. This is how they move and do everything. But now you're seeing more of the kind of the more, I would put it, more center-left groups, democracy advocates saying, you know what, let's tie into this movement because this is a ticket forward. And the Human Rights Project has been in decline for the last 15 years globally. We've been losing ground. We've been losing a lot of ground to autocrats, to any sort of number of things. And then you got this huge spectrum of what technology can do to suppress people. Technology can make our lives all better, but it can also be used to suppress people. And now people are looking at the specter of how an autocrat can use this technology to suppress people, or people with a particular ideology suppress the minority. And folks are saying, we've got to get ahead of some of these curves or we're going to be in a real problem. A number of you are completely familiar with the situation in Xinjiang, China. And to me, as I've studied and I've been around this issue and talked about it a lot, this is the beta test for what you're going to see autocrats do in a lot of places around the world is this high-tech virtual police state. Cameras everywhere, cell phones tracked, required that you put in your location device on your cell phone for the government to have, genetic sampling, social credit scores, and then I think soon in a number of these places, electronic currency that there won't be a hard currency. It'll be all digitized and then trackable again by the government at all times. And you can turn it on or you can turn it off. And just the spectrum of all you can do, and even doing something like driving a car that they're mobile computers anymore. You're going, well, how much is this going to be impacted as well? All this is currently available technology, and it can be used for good or for ill. Technology is morally neutral, and you're seeing it being beta tested and designed and how you can use it to suppress a religion. And you're starting to see these systems then follow out and go out in other places. That's why, again, this is the most important human rights movement on the planet today. What we're doing here and what we're seeking, because here's a core of people that have a passion. And you got to remember too, religion is often the only institution left in a country with enough stature, with enough adherence, with enough passion to actually stand up to a government. There's just, in most places, there's nothing else that can do it or will do it. And places like communist China, they saw the play of what happened to the Soviet Union. They saw what happened in Poland, where you had a long dormant Catholic Church, but then this latent seed that was there that when Pope John Paul shows up and says, "Be not afraid," this thing sprouted and it ate them. And they're not about to allow that to happen again. And it's not just Christianity or Catholics. I mean, in China, I mean, it started with the Tibetan Buddhists, and it's Muslims, it's Falun Gong, and it's everybody, Christians. So this is an amazing time, and you are the hardy ones that are working on this. I say we're noticed better by outside groups and people in democracy advocacy. There's another piece of why we're so important to the broader movement today, and I think it's starting to be the realization that if you ever want to stop or slow down the genocides in the world, you've got to grant religious freedom to everybody, particularly to your minority populations. This is the essence of it, because most genocides are of religious minorities. It was true certainly in the World War II and the Holocaust, where you had this horrible thing to the Jews, but it's true today in Xinjiang of the Muslims. It's true of the Muslim population in Burma. It was true of the Yazidis and Christians in northern Iraq. It's virtually most of the genocides in the world are of a religious minority. So if you're ever going to say never again with any possibility of having a true impact on it, you're going to have to guarantee religious freedom for your minority populations, period. You've got to do it. This is our only real hope to slow this train down, and we've had continued genocides when we've said many times, never again. How many times have you heard that said? And we keep saying, coming, here it is again, instead of never again. This is the only way. And I think we're starting to get some resonance with people putting the two together and say, maybe I don't want to admit it, but that is true. And we're going to have to do that. A couple other comments that I want to make, and then this is such a quality crowd, I'll open up for questions. The movement is growing for religious freedom, and the problem is growing. I was flying back, again, this was from Taiwan this last time. I was flying back from there, and I was thinking, we're doing 3 times as much in the religious freedom space as we've ever done before, and I've been around the movement for 20 years. There's more groups forming, they're stronger, they're more organized, they're in more places, there's more unity, there's more different religious groups involved than we've ever had before. I used to hold meetings on religious freedom when I was in the Senate, and we would get 5 people, and 2 of them are me and my staff member and I. So we got 3 people. You can put together, we'll have the International Religious Freedom Summit at the end of this month, January 30, 31. If you're not registered, go on the irfsummit.org website and register. I hope all of you are going to be there or around it. We'll have, we had 1,200 people last year. We're hoping for 1,500 this year. It's people from all over the world, and many bringing in their stories about it. It'll be an amazing gathering. It'll be the largest gathering of religious freedom activists by far on the year, and I hope you can come to it. That's from 3 to that. And these will be people of passion and of different faiths from all over the world to connect with. So the movement's 3 times as big. The problem has gotten 10 times as big. That's the issue. Used to be we mostly struggled with communism and militant Islam. Kind of were the 2 real key centers of it, and they were tough and they were hard, but a lot of other places, would kind of leave you alone. And even before Xi Jinping, the Chinese weren't in a lot of places too bad. It was more of a regional instead of a national issue on religion, and they would allow religion to flourish in a number of places. Now, it's communist China they're at war with faith. It's a war they will not win, but they are at war with it, and they're spreading it to other places. They're acolytes like Nicaragua. You just saw the Catholic bishop got released this last weekend. Ortega's left the Catholics alone for 20 years, and then he switches his backing from Taiwan to China, And I'm just sure what the Chinese have said, you've got to put the Catholics under your boot, or they're the ones that can actually get you. And he's closed down schools, he's closed down radio stations, he's locked up priests and bishops. You're seeing this war that's out there, whereas before it used to be kind of whatever takes place. And then you've got Hindu nationalism being so strong and growing in India. And India used to be this really tolerant. It's a place that started 3 major religions themselves. It's kind of, you want to be this, you want to do that, that's fine. It's very easy going about it. And now with Hindu nationalism, you've got 100+ churches burned last year alone, probably a lot more. The communal violence is high. You've got a number of Muslims being chased and killed. Cow vigilantes out, and as a Kansan, that gets pretty close to my heart, when you're kind of talking about people coming after you to kill you if you murder cows, and you're kind of going, it's kind of our business. It's you're kind of, not to hurt anybody that likes cows, but we like beef. Anyway, you're seeing this rise in a lot of different autocratic places. So let me just conclude on this. I think, I don't know that there's been any more of an important time to work this space than now. And it reminds me of the farm I grew up on, and you got a great harvest field of wheat out there. It looks fabulous. And you see this huge, big thunderstorm coming in. And you're going, that could be full of hail, and that could damage, and that could destroy that whole wheat crop. And so you just get out there and you run that combine as hard as you can. You get as much harvest in as you possibly can, because this big storm is coming. And I think that's really a lot of where we are right now. It's just, there's a beautiful group of souls out there that are just seeking and yearning to be free. And you got a huge storm cloud coming and over them. I think we have to work. So it's whenever those days, and I remember those days, it's not a day that you're out fixing fence and saying, okay, I've got 100 things I can do on the farm. I can fix fence today. I can, patch this up and patch that. No, you run the combine as hard as you can, because the harvest is out there and the storm is coming. And we've got to run as hard as we can right now. And you may get weary, and you may be tired of doing this work, and you may think people don't appreciate you, and you may think it's just hopeless, because the more I keep doing, the problem keeps getting bigger. But that's not the right answer. The answer is just keep at it, because there are just a lot of people dependent upon you. I mean, this is the center of gravity of religious freedom, is in the United States, and it's people here that organize, that draw this to attention, that spread it around the world. This is the country built on religious freedom. This is the country founded by pilgrims coming here seeking this very thing. It is in our DNA, literally. It is more American than apple pie and hot dogs. Religious freedom is. This is central to us. And if we don't stand and really push and really fight for it, nobody else will. We've got to do it. And we can do it, and we are doing it. Just don't grow weary in doing good, because the season is critical for us. So with that, Mark, I've got other things I could talk about, but that really hits kind of the core of what I wanted to start with. And let me open up for comments or questions that people might have.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yes, sir. And I don't know, Mark, how you want to do this? You want people to come up here, and so you can be broadcast.
Happy New Year, Mr. Ambassador. I am a Foreign Service Officer at the Department of State. Howard Chung introduced me to you back when you were over there.
How's Howard doing?
Oh, he's well. He's in Guyana dealing with issues with Venezuela. In any case, him and Miriam. But given your long experience at the Senate, and also your time as ambassador for religious freedom, my name is Michael check him. So I'm curious in terms of like secularism, and especially given your experience working with counterparts all over the world, particularly, let's say, Europe and in the UK. How would you gauge this day, these days, in terms of, the diplomatic community, in terms of the foreign policy community in the West, in terms of how they're perceiving religion and religious freedom? Of course, you're probably familiar with domestically a lot of the conflict and tensions over the First Amendment and in the interpretation of it. I myself, I've been fortunate when I was at our mission, the embassy in Manila, Philippines. I just wanted to start a small group, just a fellowship, Christian fellowship group. And fortunately, the management chief, minister counselor, he had no problem with that. It wasn't something embassy mandated, but it was something grassroots. And he had the proper interpretation of the Constitution. So I guess in terms of diplomacy and foreign policy, what does it seem like to you, the atmosphere of like the superpowers and the first world country, which has a lot of influence from secularism since the 20th century? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the State Department is better. I think it's got a long ways to go. Remember when we first passed the International Religious Freedom Act? Madeleine Albright was secretary. There was a real debate about whether or not the president would even sign it. They didn't like the idea of countries of particular concern. They didn't like the idea of an annual report. Then they thought this was all kind of a separation of church and state, that we should stay completely away from all of that. And we pointed out, obviously, yes, separation of church and state, but there's also a free exercise clause. And you got a whole bunch of people here that don't have any right to free exercise. And finally, really, Madeleine Albright, to her great credit, comes down in favor of the bill. The bill was proposed by Don Nichols and Dianne Feinstein. They were the two primary original carriers of it, and it passed. But that was a breakthrough moment, because before then it was like the State Department foreign policy apparatus was allergic or completely opposed to things of faith. Remind me a little bit of when George Bush first talked about bringing charitable groups into welfare type of programs, compassionate conservatism agenda. There was a big rejection initially on the left, saying, terrible, you can't do these sort of things. This is a mixing of church and state, it's horrible. And then, as the issue unfolded and you got all these churches and the religious people getting involved in helping out in prisons and homeless shelters and things, and people kind of go, well, okay, it's kind of all right, as they invested their spiritual capital in this. That's where I see kind of the same place for the State Department. So under Trump, you get a breakthrough in the Middle East around the Abrahamic Accords. Now, who's Abraham? Let me think about who he is. And before, on the Middle East, you never talk about religion in the Middle East peace. This will be the surest way you kill Middle East peace, is to get religion in. Well, it turns out it's a very religious part of the world, and you've got to actually engage religion to get peace in the Middle East. And they did, at least philosophically, and not opposition, and you get this amazing break. Now, timing was also important. There was a lot of other factors in it as well. But what the State Department and our foreign policy system, I think, is starting to recognize is that don't just keep religion at arm's length. Yes, we have separation of church and state, but this is also can be an absolutely powerful tool in good diplomacy. And it's got to be used right. It can't be establishment by the U.S. So I think we're making some progress there now. I think we got a long ways to go, and I think the Republicans are far more open to this than the Democrats are, but it's coming along. And so I'm hopeful, and we're a lot better than we were previously, which may not be saying much. It's a pretty low bar, but we're a lot better than we were. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much for your talk, Senator Brownback. My name is James. I'm the editor of Providence Magazine here at the IRD. My question is, it would seem that the number one offender towards religious liberty today is the Chinese Communist Party for their oppression against the Uyghurs. However, as you mentioned before, Narendra Modi and the BJP party in India may very well be the second worst offenders against religious liberty for their, I shouldn't say maybe what they're doing explicitly, maybe the rhetoric they're promoting against religious minorities in India, whether it's Christians or Muslims. And so in the realm of foreign policy, it seems to me that with China sort of doing the very worst against religious liberty and India maybe being perhaps the second worst or still certainly not ideal, we have this balancing act to strike where I'm really not happy about what's happening in China against the Uyghurs or against house churches, say, in China. But it would seem that India is the strongest, and Narendra Modi's India is the strongest counterweight to China. And so it seems for American foreign policy, it seems a really sort of sound strategy is to invest in India financially or otherwise to be a counterweight to China and China's malignant influence. But at the same time, India itself is not, what's going on in India right now, it's very distressing for what's happening to Christians and Muslims and other religious minorities. And it seems to be the realist, quote unquote, position would be to just support India against China for the sake of having a better international powers playing off each other, a stronger international equality of powers so as to avoid conflict. But it doesn't seem quite right to say that what's happening in India is not quite as bad as what's happening in China. Therefore, let's support India, as far as we can. It doesn't seem right to just sort of ignore the oppression against Christians and Muslims in India just purely for the sake of supporting a counterweight to China in Asia. And so we seem to be left with, no good options, I suppose, although Providence being a realist publication, we're accustomed to having no good options and rather selecting the best of the bad options. But I'd love it if you could comment on how we should think about trying to counterbalance China as a really grievous offender of religious liberty when the strongest counterbalances in Asia, which would be India and maybe after India, Indonesia, which has its own problems, how we should go about doing that in a way that is ethically consistent.
Yeah, that's always the problem with foreign policy is that you don't get here is a clear top choice and it's pretty clean versus evil, good, evil, yes, pick good, no evil. You just rarely get that in a foreign policy setting, even as much as I like my old John Wayne movies where it's good guy, bad guy, gunfight, bad guy always gets to pull first, but he always goes down. It's just, I like that scenario, but you just don't get those. I think the key and one of the key differences between India and China is India is a democracy and China is a totalitarian of a Mao type figure now. And so we actually have chances to go into India and change the dynamic here. We can start raising information. We can, we can distribute information through media, vast media in India, of showcasing this. We can bring stories up and use democracy to kind of help change India, because I don't like this Hindu nationalism. I think it's poisonous for them, and I think it's poisonous for the world. And you're right. We've got to build our relationship with India offsetting China. So there's just really no question that, and this one troubles me about the Indians, is I think they then use that knowing, okay, you guys need us, and so we can kind of do what we want to on this issue. No, you can't. And so I think we have to raise these issues with them. It's just what's like when I was when I was in the dating game years ago. I've been married 41 years now. On the first date, I didn't tell the girl, really like how you look, but that big lump on your nose, not doing anything for me. You just don't, that's not on the first date. You don't point that. Now, maybe on the 10th one or something, you might say, I could do something here. And I think that's with India too. You don't lead with this. You say, okay, we need you guys. We need you guys. You can grow and prosper as a nation, the largest population nation on earth, with us backing you and with our supply chains and things. We've got a lot to offer you, and we've got a lot to offer you. We've got a lot of relationships back and forth. There's, I don't know how many million Indian descendant Americans that are here. Many of them have done very well in this country. There's a lot of people-to-people contact. And I think, we're going to build this relationship. We're going to build a security relationship. We want to work with you. You cannot allow these people to be getting killed and slaughtered. You cannot allow Manipur and you have 170 churches, or somebody give me the current number. That how many?
400.
400 churches burned in less than a year's period of time.
2 days.
There you go, in 2 days. You can't do it. And then I get people telling me, well, it's not really religion, it's ethnic, it's this, it's that. And you go, well, why are they burning all churches then? Why don't they burn an ethnic grocery store or a restaurant if it's just ethnic? This is how it gets expressed. So I think we have to raise this with them, and I think we have to be persistent and clear about those things. It's just, I think we're going to have to do it in a context of this broader relationship, and I think we're going to have to work on the ground in India too, to change things there and use the democracy that exists. And if people have better answers than that, dealing with India in the United States is hard. The Indian American community has really invested itself well in the political structure in the United States, and they use that real effectively. They know how to do this. And so you're having to fight against that counterbalance and weight as well. I think we are always off if we don't stand for truth and with moral clarity, even if it's against a good ally. I think you have to stand with truth and moral clarity, or you really have lost your basis. And this is the country that stands more than any in the world for a moral clarity. And we have to. Well,
Thank you very much for your talk. This is another sort of very particular question about a knotty problem. Usually in religious freedom or other issues, if the U.S. government is not acting or speaking strongly, you usually know there's another interest, like India, classic example.
Yeah.
But still a mystery to me is Nigeria. That why did they lift its designation, and why are they stubborn on that? And even the argument that the killings in Nigeria are due to climate change.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a background issue. If the Sahel is drying out, then cattle herders are under pressure. But it doesn't explain what they do. So, but have you any idea why the State Department is just so soft-pedaling Nigeria?
Yes. I fought this fight internally, and we whipped them because we got them declared a CPC country, and then they flipped it back. This is the victory of the bureaucracy, Paul. This is deep state winning one. And they, not that this is the only one they've ever won. They've won a lot of them. But we had these stats. They weren't as bad when I was an ambassador as they are now, of the number of people getting killed, the overtness. And I would go within the bureaucracy, and I'm meeting with different people, and we'd get pushed back from NSC, and we'd get pushed back inside a State Department, and the bureaucratic intellectuals within the bureaucracy, and I'd meet with them, and they'd say, it's not a religion issue. And I'd say, okay, what issue is it? farmer herder. It's what your point. It's ethnic. It's not religious. It's climate change. It's weak governance. And I say, okay, I believe all those are probably factors. But at the core of this is still, why are the Christians being killed by the Muslims that are coming in? And how did they get the AK-47s when they used to have sticks to herd their cattle with? Where did the guns come from? And they would kind of obfuscate. And at the end of the day, what it came down to was the intellectuals and the bureaucracy are terrified of a religious war in Nigeria. Terrified. And that if they call this a division based on religion of any type, even if they only say that's 10% of the factors, it's only 10% religious, and it's 90% these other things, they believe that will stimulate a religious division and a religious war inside of Nigeria. And if it lights in Nigeria, it'll go throughout that middle of the country. And so they fight with everything they have against this being categorized in any way as a religious conflict. And that was the experience I had there. And I told them, I think you guys are, I didn't say this, I didn't say I think you're nuts, but I think you're nuts. And you are ignoring reality, willfully ignoring reality. But they saw it as a greater good if they ignore and paper over this. I saw the same thing in the Balkans. The history of the Balkans based on religious-based conflicts there. And I was saying, let's get the religious leaders in the Balkans together to reconcile with each other. Start with the religious leaders that were willing to, and to reconcile between Muslims and Orthodox and Catholics and Protestants, whatever, that are still there. But it's primarily these three that have been killing each other for centuries in the Balkans, right? And the soil breathes of these long, old animosities. And every story in the Balkans starts with, well, 373 years ago, these guys killed my ancestors. Yeah, well, 122 years ago, your ancestors killed them over here. And but the soil breathes of it. And I said, let's get the religious leaders together. They all believe in reconciliation in one way or another, and let's start a reconciliation process. And they didn't initially. We had to really work for months to talk the State Department even to considering that, because they said, no, you're going to blow it up further. And I said, you're never going to get peace until you do address it. And they were finally coming along at the end, and time ran out. But I think it's really at the heart of it. It's a lack of understanding of what faith and religion is really about in the diplomatic corps. It's not based on reason in their estimation, and therefore it's not real. That was my experience. Sir.
Hi, Chris Hayes, Leadership Institute. I met you there.
Yeah.
You were there recently.
Yeah.
Good to see you again. So you mentioned that the sort of the old hobgoblins were Islam and communism. I'm curious. I know that communism, as such, from Cold War era communism, is sort of gone. The whole economic argument has passed, but we're in this cultural Marxism moment that I think a lot of people call it like a religion of its own, leftism of some kind. It could be a religion of its own in many, many respects, but without a God. And so I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about the rise, not just in secularism in the West, but in nihilism, meaninglessness, and the implicit quest for meaning, which is giving rise to a lot of fanaticism of all sorts, not just, a given sect here or there. Because to me, it seems that there's a link there with maybe the deep state or something. So even in Turkey or India, where you have these rising, religious nationalism, it's political. It's a consolidation of political power. And then the reverse in China is also a consolidation of political power. And so I'm wondering do you see something in that? I mean, do you see that the proliferation of faith, of all faiths, is somehow under strain in the proliferation of government bureaucracies and superstates?
Yeah, it's good. That's thoughtful. I don't. I hope this answers on your point. I believe if I were out in a presidential candidate now, and I ran for president, not very successfully at one point in time, and if people asked me today, why are you running for president? My answer would be to save Western civilization. I think we're at that profound of a moment now. I think we're at such a, and what I mean by that, Western civilization is built on primarily kind of Greek reason that there is a God and it is discoverable what his attributes are, and we ought to kind of live the way he modeled or he designed us, and the Judeo-Christian ethic, much of which is built around the absolute beauty and inherent dignity of the individual created in the image of God in every one of you, equally. I mean, and you are in an incredible creation, never to be recreated, never to be repeated, an image of the living God. And that dignity, that beauty led kind of Western civilization to this, really pinnacle of running the world for the last 1,000 years or so, off of kind of those two twin thoughts, really, this inherent dignity of the individual and natural laws, discoverability, and we should live according to it. Now you're in this moment where you're just kind of walking away from the very trunk of Western civilization. You say, I don't believe in any of it. There's not a God. Well, if I don't believe in a God, then I can't be created in his image because I don't believe he exists. So why were you created? I just happened to get here. Okay, then you just happen to discover, and whatever is your truth is what truth is. And so you kind of fracture out into everything, and you don't have any core organizing principles, and things really start to have a lot of trouble. Then, because civilizations are generally built around a faith, and the Western civilization has profited the world incredibly over the past 1,000 years. We have given more prosperity, more individual dignity, more freedom to people than they've ever had, not without our problems. We have had problems. We've had slavery, and we've picked on people, and we've treated this group wrong. I mean, all those things exist as well. But at its core, this model has been fabulous for the world, and we're running from it, or we're chopping it off at the root. And so then I think you get these things that really, at the end of the day, you don't have an organizing principle for your society, of which you have things really falling apart at that. I think this is a really incredible moment. So I started thinking about this. I was in Iowa at one of the presidential debates, and this thought was really hitting me. And so I thought, I want to just do some research on Western civilization. I just want to kind of freshen up on what it's about and everything. So I was down visiting. Two of my sons are at the University of Arkansas. One teaches there and one goes there. And I just went into the library I wanted to get the primer book on Western civilization that they use at an SEC school, the University of Arkansas. This isn't Harvard. It's a good school, but it's not Harvard. This is good, basic people going there. I thought, I just want the basic book you teach Western civilization. There wasn't one there in an SEC school. Now, there was one on slavery in Western civilization. There was one on how treated indigenous people in Western civilization, and how wrong this was, everything. Okay, agreed. But I just want the basic primer on what Western civilization is. Give me the basics of how it grew over the 2,000 years. There wasn't one there. This is a problem. When you don't even know what your civilization is built, and you don't even teach it. You don't care to teach it anymore. I'd start there. Start teaching Western civilization. Thank you. I hope that answered your question some.
Well, to ensure we end on an upbeat note, Ambassador.
Yeah, please.
Since you're a man of hope and a man of optimism, Give us some words of hope and optimism.
Well, the hope and optimism, certainly in my faith, we win in the end of this. You know, in almost every one of the Judeo-Christian biblical stories, either God is punishing his people to learn a lesson that's important for them long term, or he puts up incredible odds against his people, and they still win just to prove that it's him that's doing it and not us. Is the normal story that he has. You know, the Gideon's army that he gets, you know, I'm thinking if I'm Gideon, I start out with, what's the number? He starts out with 30,000, thinking, okay, we can take these guys with 30,000. Way too many. Cut them in half, 15,000. Still way too many. Now, wait a minute, Lord. They're as thick as locusts out there on the other side, and you just cut my army in half, and you said we're still too many? Yes. What are we going to get this down to? He gets down to 300, right? And we're going to take them on as thick as locusts over there? Yeah. And we're going to whip them all. And you always kind of look at that and you just go, how's this going to work? And that's how he does it. Because it's not us, it's him. My faith continues to lift me up and bolster me. I still feel sorry for the other side. As strong as they are, we're going to whip them. I don't know how it's going to happen. I know all I've got to do is to do my piece where I am, fight my battle. I had a guy tell me the other day, I was talking and complaining about this and saying, what should we do? And he said, well, you know, I'd point out to you that in the Revolutionary War, there was like 375 battles or something thereabouts in the Revolutionary War in the United States. You know how many of those battles George Washington fought in? He said, no, 17. And I don't know the exact, it was 17 or 35, but yeah, George Washington did not fight in most of the battles in the Revolutionary War. Who did? A bunch of local yokels. They got organized and were mad enough and were fighting against the greatest army on the face of the planet at the day and whipped them all. Not all those battles, we didn't win all of them, but we won the war. I mean, my point is we fight in the place we're in. And we take heart and do it here, and we do it joyfully. Final story, I was in Texas, down in Austin, Texas, visiting a daughter of mine, and I was walking to get a cup of coffee, and I was walking back, and there was one of these classical storms rolling in, thunderstorms that we get a lot of in the Midwest, so they get in Texas, big rolling black clouds coming in. I'm looking at this thing, boy, I'm going to get wet if I don't hurry up and pick the pace up. And so I'm starting to walk back faster. The street lights are coming on in the middle of the day because it's getting dark enough. You know, I know what's coming. There's a big thunderstorm coming through here. I'm going to get soaked, and I got to get moving. And then this thought hits me to just stop. And I did. And I stopped and I looked up, and there's a bird on the light pole when the light had just come on, and he's just singing his heart out. The bird is just as loud and as happy as he can. And I thought, that's the answer. We all see the storm. No question about this. I see it. What's my response? Just sing. Sing my heart out, where I am, doing what I can. And that's how we win. And we will. It could be tough. It could be nasty, difficult. There could be a lot of carnage involved in this. My role is just to do my job where I am and sing. And that's what I'll do. And I know that's what you guys will do too. God bless you all.